What if the strongest reaction was no reaction at all? In a world where people are quick to defend, quick to argue, and quick to lose themselves in emotional chaos, what if you could remain calm, clear, and untouchable? This isn't about being cold or indifferent. It's about mastering yourself. In today's video, we'll explore how ancient Stoic wisdom can help you take back control over your emotions, not by suppressing them, but by observing, understanding, and transforming them. You'll learn how to handle insults without reacting, let go of what you can't control, and become the kind of person who moves through life with quiet power. This isn't theory, it's a way of living one that brings you peace, strength, and the rare kind of confidence that doesn't need to shout. Let's begin. Don't let the pain lead you. Calmness is the beginning of a real counterattack. Have you ever felt betrayed, hurt, or disrespected to the point where every cell in your body urged you to strike back? That feeling is deeply instinctual, so human, and yet so easily manipulated. When you're insulted, the deepest part of your instinct screams, do something, make them regret it. You think of sharp words, of doing something that will make them feel the pain you just experienced. But this is the first trap, a subtle trap. It makes you believe that reacting is how you regain power, when in fact, it only pulls you deeper into someone else's control. The one who hurt you might not even remember what they said, but you do, hours later, even days after, each time you recall it. You continue to allow them space in your mind. It's not their action that's making you suffer, but your mind's endless repetition of it. And then, the anger seeps in like a slow poison. It pushes you to react, to lose control, and most importantly, to lose yourself. Stoicism doesn't ask you to become cold-blooded. On the contrary, it teaches you to look straight into that emotional storm and ask a very simple question: will this reaction take me where I want to go? If the answer is no, then that is when your counterattack begins, not with rage, but with calmness. Calmness is not surrender. Calmness is a strategy. It's the first state that allows you to see everything clearly without the lens of pain. It's the shift from being controlled to being in control. And from that place of stillness, you become truly powerful, not because you fight back, but because you are no longer controlled. Don't let someone else's wound rewrite how you behave. You don't need to scream to prove you're okay. You just need to be silent long enough to remember. Peace does not need to be proven. Conscious indifference. When you don't react, you reclaim power. Some people come into your life just to test the limits of your patience. They say sarcastic things, do things that offend you, and then watch to see how you'll respond. This isn't random. It's a test. And your first reaction is exactly what they're hoping for. They want you to get angry. They want you to lose control. They want you to shout back, to argue, to act impulsively, because that proves they got to you. And once they get to you, they hold the power. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The person who wronged you wronged themselves if you don't react." Stoicism doesn't teach you to avoid conflict. It teaches you to recognize this simple truth. Many conflicts don't need to be engaged, because not engaging is already a victory. People often misunderstand. Silence is weakness. Non-reaction is passivity. But in truth, the urge to instantly react is the reflex of someone who cannot control themselves. Calmness, on the other hand, is cultivated. It's a choice, not a reflex. It's when you see someone trying to provoke you and you quietly smile, because you know they no longer have the power to knock you off balance. And at a deeper level, you understand this. You don't need to respond to every word, correct every misunderstanding, or prove anything at all. You're not living to meet low expectations. You're living for a higher reason, a reason that does not require validation from anyone. When you choose not to react, you are preserving precious energy. you're making room for clarity. Instead of wasting it on meaningless confrontations in a world where everyone wants to have the last word, the one who chooses silence is the only one who keeps their peace. And sometimes, the most elegant revenge isn't success. It isn't silence either. It's absolute indifference. It's when they realize you no longer care, you're no longer hurt, you're no longer playing their emotional game. You're not running away. You're not fighting either. You stand still, and that renders them powerless. You'll know you're making progress when one day, the person who once triggered your anger now only makes you smile. Not because they've changed, but because you're no longer on the same frequency. That is true strength. Not the power to control others, but the power to master yourself. Silent success. How to make them regret. Without saying a word, there is a kind of revenge no one sees, but everyone feels. It's not loud. It needs no explanations, no comebacks, no social media confessions or emotional outbursts. It happens in silence, a deep, steady, and powerful silence. It is silent success. The one who hurt you may have hoped you'd collapse, that you'd live in despair, regret, and rage, that you wouldn't be able to move. On maybe they even left behind parting words, so cruel they echo in your mind every night. They did that not because they were strong, but because they thought you were weak. And sometimes you believed it too. On lonely nights, during quiet moments of remembering, you may have felt the urge to prove something, to go back, to be seen, to be acknowledged. That is another trap, wanting to succeed just to get revenge. But Stoicism will stop you at that very threshold. It will ask a question you cannot ignore. Why are you succeeding? To prove something to someone? Or to become the person you were born to be? If you're succeeding just to retaliate, you're still living in the past, still being led by someone else, even in silence. But if you succeed because you are worthy, because you see your own value, and you know what you're capable of, then you no longer need revenge. You're not succeeding to make them regret, but one day they will regret because they'll realize they misjudged you, and sadly for them, they no longer have a place in your life to fix that mistake. Seneca once said, "Let your enemy see you surpass them, not with retaliation, but by living a better life. A life that needs no explanation, no warning, no success announcement on any platform. Because those who live with true value don't need to speak it. They show up, and that's enough. And then, step by step, you grow. You move forward. You work on yourself, rebuild your life, and find peace and meaning from within every little action. Whether it's reading every night, waking up early to exercise, learning a new skill, doing a job you love, or simply making it through a difficult day quietly becomes a silent declaration that you are moving on, stronger and more grounded. No words needed, no looking back. You're moving forward. And while they were hoping you'd stay stuck in the past, you've reached a higher place, the place of someone who no longer needs external validation to define their worth. The best revenge is becoming the version of yourself they never imagined. When they see you now calm, mature, fully alive, they'll have no choice but to accept one truth. You moved on without them, and that silences them more than any angry outburst ever could. It's an ending that doesn't need to declare who won or lost. But if you need a sign, here it is. You've won since the moment you stopped needing them to lose. Focus on what you can control. That's how you protect your mind from chaos. Have you ever found yourself frustrated because someone didn't behave the way you expected? Have you ever felt drained from trying to change someone who had no intention of changing? Have you ever spent an entire night worrying about something you could do absolutely nothing about, except sit there and be anxious? We've all been there, and in those very moments, we're draining our own life force. Stoic philosophy, dating back thousands of years, offers a principle that is as coldly simple as it is foundational to spiritual freedom. Learn to clearly distinguish between what you can control and what you cannot. Epictetus once said, "Some things are up to us, and some are not." That distinction is the foundation of peace. Yet in reality, we spend most of our energy on what lies outside our grasp, what others say, how they treat us, the past we can't change, a future that hasn't happened, the gaze of strangers, someone's opinion of us, a rejection, a slammed door, an unexplained silence. The more we try to control what doesn't belong to us, the more we spiral into feelings of failure, anger, and helplessness. Meanwhile, what we can control is often neglected: how we respond, our daily attitude, what we allow into our minds, what we choose to keep, and what we let go of, where we spend our time, and what is truly worth it. A mind fixated on what it cannot control is a mind that will never be at peace, and a restless mind cannot think clearly nor find stillness. You can't stop the world. You can't make people behave rationally. You can't make life unfold according to your script, but you can turn inward. Observe what's happening in your mind and ask, what am I allowing to control me today? When you pause to ask that question, you'll realize the outer chaos is often just a reflection of an unmanaged inner world. When someone insults you, you can't control their words, but you can control whether or not you let those words stay in your head. When someone walks away, you can't control their choice, but you can control whether or not you continue living with strength and dignity. When an opportunity slips by, you can't control the past, but you can control how you prepare for the next one. Stoic thinking doesn't teach you to give up. It teaches you to focus, to return to what truly belongs to you: your character, your actions, your attitude, your thoughts, your discipline, your daily choices. That's why, when the world is in chaos, the Stoic becomes quieter. They don't waste energy trying to change the outside world. They concentrate all their strength on keeping their inner world steady, and from that steadiness, they act. They act rightly, even when no one sees. They act consistently, even when no one applauds. They act based on values, not fleeting emotions. None of us can avoid adversity, but what you can do, and always can do, is protect your mind from being occupied by things that don't deserve space. That's how you become untouchable. Not because the outside world changes, but because you are no longer so easily shaken from within. Restrain your emotions, the shortest path to becoming untouchable in life. Nothing wounds us faster than unregulated emotions. We get angry when insulted. We feel sad when abandoned. We get scared when rejected. We feel lost when not acknowledged. And in the chaos of those emotions, we act without thinking, say things we shouldn't, react instead of respond, and afterward, we are the ones who bear the consequences, not because others were too powerful, but because we were too easily led. A person who is ruled by their emotions is a person who can be manipulated by the outside world. And when you no longer have command over your inner world, you will never have control over the outer one. Stoicism doesn't teach you to suppress emotions. It doesn't tell you to become a cold machine, never happy, never sad, never in pain. It only teaches you this: emotions are temporary, but their consequences can last a long time. Restraint doesn't mean repression. Restraint is the ability to recognize when you are under emotional influence and choose not to act in that moment. When you're insulted, emotions rise like fire, but you don't have to let it turn into a blaze. You can choose to pause, choose to breathe slowly, choose to stay silent, choose to say nothing. Because you know, the quicker you react, the more control you lose. There's a Stoic saying worth reflecting on: no one can hurt you unless you allow them into your mind. You cannot control who will try to hurt you, but you absolutely can control whether or not they get to live in your thoughts. The stronger someone is internally, the less they speak when provoked, not because they're afraid, but because they understand the value of composure. They know that every impulsive reaction is a step away from the steady ground they've worked so hard to build within themselves. People might say you're just tolerating. They might think you're weak. But you don't live to prove anything to anyone. You live to protect your inner strength. And restraint is your first layer of armor. We all get angry, that's real. But what matters is this: do you let anger control you, or do you let it pass through without leaving a scar? Strength is not in the reaction. Strength is in the stillness. The one who controls their emotions is truly untouchable, not because they don't feel, but because they know when to let feelings drift away like passing clouds, and when to act with clear reason. And then you'll see, you don't need to shout to be feared. You don't need to clap back to protect your pride. You don't need to respond to every insult to prove your place. Your calm presence, your silence at the right moment, your unwavering gaze, your steady posture, these are your loudest declarations of inner strength. When you can restrain your emotions, you are no longer a victim of circumstances, no longer a puppet of feelings. You become the commander, the creator, not of others, but of your own inner life. Understand your emotions before letting go. Observe to liberate, not to escape. Everyone's heard the advice, just let it go. But how many truly know how to let go? Many think letting go means forgetting, pushing it aside, not thinking about it anymore, pretending it never happened. But the truth is far less simple. You might force yourself not to think about the one who hurt you. You might fake a smile and say you're fine. You might try to appear strong, but in your quietest moments, when no one's around, the pain still returns. And it's not coming back to torture you. It comes back to remind you, you haven't truly faced it yet. Stoicism isn't about forgetting. It teaches you to look directly and understand, because only through understanding can true release happen. Not escape, not denial, but release through awareness. Emotions are like children. The more you ignore them, the louder they cry. The more you suppress them, the more they fight back. But if you sit down, look directly at them, and ask what they need, they begin to quiet, because they've been acknowledged. And so it is with you. Your anger is not your enemy. It's a signal. It says you were hurt. You felt disrespected. You felt like you didn't matter. But if you push it aside too soon, if you force yourself to move on without understanding why it's there, then you're just building a hard shell outside, while letting your insides rot. A true Stoic isn't someone without emotion. They are someone who sees emotion clearly but does not let it rule them. When you feel anger rise, pause, breathe. Don't rush to act. Instead, ask yourself, what am I feeling? Why is this emotion so strong? Where does it come from, a present event or an old wound? If I act now, am I reacting or consciously choosing? That's when you're no longer swept up in the emotional wave. You become the observer, not the one being dragged. And from that space of observation, you can choose to respond mindfully or not at all, because you see things too clearly to even need a response. True letting go isn't about denying the emotion. It's about going through it, looking it in the eye as a lesson, a sign, a necessary phase. And then, once you've understood it, no longer needs to stay. It's like carrying a heavy stone on your back without realizing it. It wears you down. But when you notice it, you set it down. You don't hate the stone. You don't cling to it. You simply see. You no longer need to carry it. The person who hurt you no longer controls you, not because they've changed, but because you've changed the way you see your own emotions. Letting go is not weakness. It is not surrender. It is not forgiveness if you're not ready. Letting go is the act of someone who knows they deserve peace more than they deserve bitterness. When you fully understand your emotions, you no longer fear them. And when you no longer fear your emotions, you've taken your first steps into inner freedom. Act according to your values. When you live right, you no longer sway easily. There are moments when you feel confused, when someone treats you unfairly, misunderstands you, belittles you, or pushes you aside. In that moment, you ask yourself, should I speak up? Should I react? Should I fight back to reclaim fairness? If this question is answered based purely on emotion, it often leads to two familiar paths: retaliation or bitter withdrawal. But a practitioner of Stoic philosophy doesn't rush toward either. Instead, they turn inward and ask a different question. What is my value in this situation? Not what's right or wrong, not who wins or loses, but what is right according to the values I've chosen to live by. When you live by your values, you no longer depend on others' behavior. You don't need someone to treat you kindly for you to act kindly. You don't need someone to believe in you for you to stay true to your integrity. You don't need recognition in order to keep acting with virtue, because values are your compass not to guide others, but to guide yourself through storms without losing your way. In a world where everything changes daily, personal values are what keep you grounded. When you clearly define what matters most to you, what is non-negotiable, what boundaries must not be crossed, then you're no longer easily swayed by opinions, judgments, or behaviors from others. Those without clear values live in constant fluctuation. They're easily influenced, quick to overreact, easily drawn into battles that aren't theirs. But those who live by their values are calm, clear, and decisive, not out of arrogance, but because they know they are doing the right thing, even when no one sees. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If what you are doing is right, don't worry about what others think. If what you are saying is true, don't be afraid of others' reactions." True success doesn't come from pleasing everyone, but from living by your principles, even when no one supports you. One of the clearest signs of someone who hasn't defined their values is that they are easily triggered. They get caught up in conflicts, take things too personally, and feel hurt by every judgment. But when your actions are grounded in internal principles, you don't chase validation, nor do you need to respond to every offhand remark. They may misunderstand you, but you still choose kindness. They may look down on you, but you still hold your dignity. They may turn away, but you keep moving forward, not for them, but because it's the right thing to do. And in the end, it's that unwavering stance that makes you unshakable. Not because you're cold, but because you no longer let fleeting emotions lead. You live by something deeper than emotion, faith in the values you've chosen. Like a tree with deeply planted roots, storms may shake its branches, but cannot uproot it. You will face turmoil. You may feel pain, exhaustion, but you will not fall, because you know what you're living for. And in that moment, you'll realize you don't need to react to defend yourself. You only need to live rightly. Your steadiness becomes your answer. They once hurt you. Now, they're just a fading shadow. Some people walked into your life and left such deep wounds that you thought you'd never heal. They said things you'll never forget. They did things that, even now, tighten your chest when you remember. You used to think of them every night. You built 100 scenarios in your mind. If you met them again, what would you say? What would you do? What would you prove? Not because you still love, still need, or still depend on them, but because you're still hurting. That's a truth that takes courage to admit. You don't want to hold on to resentment, but you haven't truly let go. You're still being held by memory, by a wound that hasn't closed, by a part of you still seeking justice. But the truth is, not all justice needs to be claimed through confrontation. Some battles are ended not with shouting, but with the stillness of a mind no longer tormented. When you patiently walk through the pain, when you fully understand your emotions, when you choose to act from values instead of reactions, you begin to change. And that change is quiet. It's not shown in words or expressions, but it's happening day by day in silence. And then, one day, you realize the person who once caused you pain no longer holds any influence in your life. Not because they apologized, not because you forgot, but because you've moved so far forward that they can no longer reach you. They are still who they were with the same behaviors, same choices, but you've changed. And from where you stand now, they're no longer worth the energy to worry about. It's not that you look down on them. It's simply that they no longer occupy any space on your mental map. They're just a memory now, like an old dream, a shadow passing through the bright light of the present you are living. You no longer need to see them again to prove you've changed. You no longer need an apology to move on. You no longer need anyone to affirm that you were right and they were wrong, because you know, as long as you still need that, you are still bound. True freedom isn't when someone admits they were wrong. Freedom is when you no longer need them for you to feel peace. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "We are rarely hurt by what actually happens, but by the way we remember it. You used to remember them in pain. But today, if you look back, you'll see clearly. It was all part of the journey. No one can bring you down if you choose to stand and move forward. They left, but you are growing. They hurt you. But from that, you learn to heal. They were once a significant chapter in your life, but they are not the entire book. And you are still writing the next pages, with peace, with wisdom, with the values forged by pain. They remain a trace, but just like a faded character on an old page. And you are now the new author of your own life. You don't live to prove anything. You live to become who you are on your darkest days. You might have whispered a promise to yourself. One day, I'll make them regret. They'll see me succeed. I'll prove my worth. It's a very human response, very real, but also very exhausting, because when you live to prove yourself, you are still living in the shadow of the past. You're acting not for you, but for the invisible presence of someone who once hurt you. You take every step forward, but keep turning back to see if they're watching. You swallow your pain to move on, but your eyes still search for the one who walked away. You grow, but you grow for someone else. And you're not wrong for feeling this way. But at some point, you'll realize living to prove something is a form of spiritual imprisonment. It keeps you from being authentic, from being free, from being light-hearted. Stoic philosophy reminds us of a core truth. Life is not a stage for you to perform on. It's a journey for you to return to your truest self. When you live to prove yourself, you live outward. You let the eyes, the words, the judgments of others decide your path. But when you live to become who you are, you turn inward. You ask, what's true to you? What brings lasting peace? What feels right at your core? Not succeed so they'll see, but grow so you no longer need them. Not I'll be better than you, but I'll be the fullest version of me. When you stop trying to prove anything, you'll notice a shift in how you do everything. No more pressure, no more expectations, no more comparisons. You do what needs to be done because it's right, not because it will get attention, validation, or bring someone back. You don't need to be seen to have value. You don't need to be recognized to be strong. Seneca once said, "No one can make you feel small unless you abandon your own dignity." And that dignity does not come from applause. It comes from consistency between what you believe and how you live. From the moment you stop living to prove something, you stop being a victim of the past. You stop carrying old stories as a reason to exist. You stop running fueled by pain. And then you do something you've never dared to do before. You let go of others' expectations. You let go of unspoken words. You let go of dreams that were only built to make someone regret losing you. From that space, you begin to live fully and freely. Each step is no longer to prove, but to expand. Each day is no longer to affirm, but to practice what's right. Each choice is no longer about external validation, but inner peace. And you'll see, what makes you unshakable isn't the success others witness, but the clarity of the person you've chosen to become. And you'll no longer need to ask, do they see me now? Because you know, seeing yourself is enough. Silence is not avoidance. It's training for inner strength. In an age where everyone wants to be heard, to be seen, to be acknowledged, silence is often mistaken for weakness. Silent people are misunderstood as lacking courage, lacking arguments, lacking convictions. But in truth, behind genuine silence lies the quiet forging of inner strength. Not all silence is the same. There is a kind of silence born from fear, inferiority, or resignation. But there is another kind, conscious silence, chosen by those who understand that they don't need to respond to everything to prove their worth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't waste your words on those who aren't seeking the truth. To live by this principle, you must learn the silence of the mind, not just the stillness of your lips." Silence is not retreat. Silence is when you see exactly what's happening and know that reacting would only make things worse. Silence is when you feel emotions rising within, but you don't let those emotions speak on your behalf. Silence is when you're being attacked, misunderstood, or even intentionally belittled, and yet you don't need to speak up to reclaim your place, because you know your place is not defined by arguments. Those who cannot manage their emotions tend to speak the most. They speak to vent. They speak to prove. They speak to soothe a bruised ego. But every rash word can become a double-edged sword, and ultimately, you are the one who gets drained. A Stoic chooses silence, not because they are weak, but because they are strong enough not to speak. They don't let impulsive emotion dictate their actions. They wait for things to settle. They observe. They listen. And if they choose to speak, it comes from clarity, not anger. Like a warrior who doesn't draw his sword at every provocation. The truly strong don't need to display power through impulsive actions. They maintain their inner state as a daily discipline, knowing that real power lies in self-restraint. Silence is also a way to protect your energy. Every unnecessary argument, every exchange made just to defend the ego, drains your mental resources, and you need that energy for more important things. For action, for building, for self-growth. Silence is also a space to hear yourself. When you stop reacting, you start observing. You see others' motives more clearly. You understand your own emotions. And most importantly, you discern what truly matters and what needs to be released. Practicing silence is a challenge. At first, it's uncomfortable because your ego wants to speak, to rebut, to win. But if you have the patience to move past that initial urge, you'll discover some victories are achieved by doing nothing at all. And then you no longer feel the need to teach someone a lesson. Life and time will take care of that. You no longer need to demand justice immediately. Your growth, your calmness, and your consistency become the most powerful response of all. At some point, you'll come to see silence is not avoidance. It is an expression of freedom. Freedom from the need to be heard, to be understood, to be validated. Freedom from impulsive reactions. Freedom to live by your values, not by your circumstances. And when you choose silence in the moments when others expect you to explode, you've already won without starting a fight. When you let go of resentment, you enter an unshakable state. Resentment is a kind of invisible chain. It doesn't hurt you all at once, but it slowly tightens, pulling you back into the past, drowning you in old wounds, and trapping you in moments that no longer exist. You don't have to be a bad person to feel resentment. In fact, resentment often arises in those who have been deeply hurt, those who once trusted fully, who once loved sincerely and in return were met with betrayal, indifference, or disregard. And what hurts most isn't what they did, but that you couldn't understand why they did it. You carry that question with you. The unfairness, the lack of closure, the missing apology. You think if they would just come back one day and speak honestly, maybe then you could let go. But time passes, no apology comes, and you remain carrying a weight that hasn't been released. Then one day you begin to ask, why am I still living with this emotion? Why am I holding on to this resentment while the person who caused it may not even remember? Stoic philosophy doesn't ask you to forgive immediately. It doesn't demand that you forget. It simply reminds you gently. You deserve peace more than you deserve bitterness. You cannot rewrite the past. You cannot force regret. You cannot make them understand your pain. But you can choose not to carry them in your mind any longer. As long as you hold resentment, you remain bound. You're still tethered to the past. You're still giving them space in your inner world. But when you no longer resent, you've reclaimed complete authority over your mind. Resentment survives on the belief that someone owes you something. But a person of true value will not tie their dignity to whether that debt is repaid. You don't need them to change, so you can be free. You only need to change the way you see things. Letting go of resentment is not forgetting the truth. It's facing the truth and choosing not to let it control you any longer. You don't forgive because they deserve it. You forgive because you deserve to feel light again. Forgiveness here is not a single act. It is a state of being. When that person crosses your mind and you no longer feel pain, no more reactions, no more need for explanations, no more desires, nothing. They're just part of a story that's past, a chapter already turned, a leaf that has fallen, nothing to hold on to, nothing to fix, nothing to hope for. And when you reach that state, you become unshakable. No one can dictate your mood with a single word. No one can drag you into negativity with a single act. No one can hurt you because no one holds the right to live inside you anymore. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Only you can harm yourself. The rest are just challenges." And when you've moved past resentment, you realize it was the hardest challenge, but also the gateway to a whole new level of inner power. You no longer need to say you've forgiven. You just live as though they never broke you. Unshakable strength doesn't come from a hardened shell. It comes from a mind that's walked through the storm and no longer carries the clouds. And if anything proves that you've truly won, it's the peace you now live with every single day.